There are definitely some things to be said about worldview in the sixth episode of the Rings of Power Season 2. We've got Sauron's evil devices and manipulating Celebrimbor, the nature of the orcs, and the impossibility of evil destroying evil. So Nathan Danneker is back on the podcast to join me in fleshing out these storylines, and hopefully there is something new to learn about Tolkien. So with that, let's dive right in.
Welcome, my lords, to the White City, where you will learn more about Middle-earth and discover differences and similarities between the Rings of Power show and Tolkien's books, and whether Amazon's show, episode by episode, is worth watching. I'm Philip Dutt, your host, and I'll be joined by Matt Vandervoort and Mark Schaefer. I hope you enjoy.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the White City Podcast. I have with me my guest back in the White City, Nathan Danneker, and it's good to have you back.
Well, thanks for getting me back.
Yeah, sure thing. And this time we're going to be reviewing episode 6 of the Rings of Power show, season 2. And I guess so we have, I believe, 3 different storylines.
Yes,
So-
I believe so. The dwarf and the elf, the EREGION and the Moria storylines are kind of intermixed with this one because Sauron is going back and forth between the two. But then we also have the stranger and hobbits out in Rune. And then in the beginning, there's a little bit with Arondir, but it's like basically just the description of all the orcs that are going to make EREGION have a very bad day. Or several days, so because it's a
Right.
siege.
Yes. Yeah, so we can start with that. I know the scene with Arondir was a little odd.
It was, yeah,
That they just put him for like one opening scene and then like that was it.
yeah,
And which too is kind of a shame because I think he's one of the better characters
Yeah.
in the show,
yeah.
especially like the best elf. And so he really betrays the elf. He gives like the whole elf character like a good representation,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Also, the idea of like him, like I know I've been listening to other podcasts. I've heard the complaints about like the elves aren't magical enough. But like when I see Arondir fight, I don't know if they're like doing this on purpose, but he always seems to be moving like everybody else is moving in slow motion, and he's like so fast compared to everybody else. Or like that's his like even Galadriel weirdly like Galadriel doesn't seem to be moving as fast as Arondir is, which is strange because Galadriel should be way stronger than him. But you know it is what it is. It's the story direction. Which we will be talking about Galadriel later on because she does show up in this episode. So,
Right.
do you want to start? So, the Arondir scene starts off, and then the first scene we do with is Lord Celebrimbor trying to make the 9, I believe. So,
Right.
yeah.
Can you give kind of like a breakdown of what happens there?
Yeah, so from what I remember, so I watched it as the weekend it came out. So from what I remember, he's like very frustrated. He seems to, especially it seems to be the revelation from about the 7 and the quote unquote flaw that's in it because of how Amazon is describing it is because he lied to Gil-galad. That lie is infecting his work. And plus everything else he's been doing and everything else is with Sauron. So he's struggling because his heart's not pure to make the 9 pure. And that's what he really wants to do is because that is the big thing for him is he's convinced like men have any kind of power, they will instantly corrupt, no matter what. And so he is like, that's like his one main goal is I want to make the 9, like you can't be corrupted by the 9. Which obviously Sauron is playing into that a little bit. I think that's one of my favorite. I didn't watch season 1 a lot I maybe watched a few clips. So I started watching season 2 and everything else, and kind of got my summary of season 1 based off of Mark, which is one of your other co-hosts, and you, of course. And so I kind of knew the storyline and everything else, but just seeing how the actor portrays Sauron and how, I guess, how devilish he is, and how much he can convince people to, like, basically think they're working for themselves, but he is actually just manipulating them to do exactly what he wants.
Right.
Is amazing, considering how short of a time it is. It's like he has done such a good job of portraying Sauron, that it's at least for the Amazon version of Sauron, which I feel like for this one. So in the books and everything else, Sauron is portrayed as more of a he does go and, like, trick the elves and everything else, but he has a lot more power. He's not. And so in the Amazon series, obviously Sauron doesn't have Mordor. Adar has. He has, in the books, he has controlled Mordor. So he has an army and everything else. So he's just
Sauron
more.
does.
Yeah, Sauron
Yeah.
does. Yeah. Adar doesn't exist at all. Nothing else. So he has that in his back pocket of, like, okay, hey, if I can't trick them, I can just send my army and just use brute force. Whereas in the show, Sauron doesn't have any army. He has to trick everybody.
Yeah.
He has to manipulate because that is the only thing he has. Which, ironically enough, is I'm assuming this is where they're eventually going to go. Is like I'm assuming he's going to go to Numenor eventually. Like, this is just, like, building up to, like, I think what's going to be his masterpiece of, like, basically manipulating his way out of prison into basically controlling Numenor.
Right.
So I'm very interested how they're going to handle that storyline, and I doubt it's going to be this season. So probably season 3 if they go on to the next one.
Right. It might do 5 seasons,
Yeah.
actually, if they can make
Yeah.
it work.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, so that was good, and the fact of, like, especially in the beginning, like, I think it was Arondir. Speaking of Arondir, I think it was like the elves don't forget, and Celebrimbor forgot the elf smith's lady's name. I was like Miriel. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Mirenia?
yes,
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, you could see his hand. I think it was this one where it was like his hand was, like, shaking when he was looking at it.
Yeah.
And it's like you can tell, like he is under a lot of stress. He is, like, losing it. And I think it was the previous in this episode, he's like, sometimes you just have to lose yourself to your work. I forget, I'm paraphrasing. Sauron's like, sometimes you just need to lose yourself to work to get what you need done, because that's what he wants them to do, because he knows that if he gives Adar too much time, he's just going to wipe everything out. And he'll live because he's Sauron, he's done it before, he's escaped, but he won't have his rings for men to corrupt. So, yeah.
Right, which I think is lore accurate, that he's at EREGION trying to forge the rings when, like, he attacks EREGION. When the orcs do. So, that is interesting. Yeah, I think it's cool that they're tying in with Sauron, especially different ways of doing magic. So,
Yes.
obviously he's influencing Celebrimbor to make the rings, and then what was it like? Oh yeah, I was saying that the people wanted an audience, right, with Celebrimbor, but he's like, no, I can't do it. So Antar's like, oh, let me do it. I got this. And he goes out and he just tells everybody, like, all right, guys, I'm now, like, in charge, doing all the administration. So, if you have anything, come to me. So he does a good job of, like, of flipping that and doing it in his favor, kind of like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then later on too, when Celebrimbor is trying to figure out what's going on,
When the siege starts.
right? And Antar's like, "Oh, just come outside, just see everything's fine." And he completely changes things, and Celebrimbor's like, "Oh wow, this is just beautiful," or whatever. And he goes back inside, and then he flips it back.
Well,
So,
he drops the illusion, and you
Right.
see what's actually going on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that where the show has lacked magic in a lot of ways is kind of showing up with Sauron.
Yes.
So which, yeah, honestly, like in other areas, the magic doesn't show up as much as it does with him.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, but so
Yeah, I really appreciated that illusion scene because it showed that Sauron was like, all right, he's about to get away. I need to actually use some of my power to actually not convince him to do that. So like, I think it was like he just like, as he was closing his eyes, he was like, he just closed his eyes and said some words of power. I'm assuming in the tongue of whatever the
black speech.
black speech.
Yeah.
And then like the crazy thing is about that scene is you recognize the siege starts at night, and Celebrimbor has lost it so much he doesn't notice that Sauron has switched it to day.
Yeah.
Like that immediately, like if I was somebody stuck in a room, like and I was like with it, like just that would be like something's off. And Celebrimbor doesn't even notice at all. And so like yeah, he's toast. Like he is a broken elf. And Sauron is basically using him like putty. So
Yeah. I think that something we've touched on before, but is also interesting for episodes in the future, is how Celebrimbor faces against Sauron in the end.
yeah.
Right? Because Celebrimbor actually in the lore fights him in combat. But you don't really see this Celebrimbor like doing that, right? For him to pick up a sword and like start swinging it, you're like, oh, okay, like I guess he's pulling out.
I could see it of like him because you kind of see in like the beginning like he's getting frustrated with his work and everything else. So like I could see when he realizes that Sauron actually is, Anatar is Sauron and everything else, and he's been tricked all this time. I could see him just like flipping a switch and just going like full berserker rage mode at Sauron, like for a fight, and kind of doing well just because he's so mad. But then Sauron will just eventually overpower him because he's just so mad he doesn't have control.
Right.
So that's how I would do it. I don't know how Amazon's going to do it. But yeah, I obviously I'm not as I'm not as good with the lore and everything else. I did not realize the 9 were being forged when the siege was happening in the books. I assume that was added, but
Okay.
yeah,
And that's neat. I mean, they're sticking to a certain point, sticking to the lore, and I mean, from what I can tell, I think that in this season they've done it better than they did on the previous season.
Yeah, for the timeline they've created, they've done better because they've moved things around so much that it can't stick truly to the books. So
Yeah.
and then I think the next one is it the dwarves or the hobbits? I forget which one is first.
Oh, we can talk about the dwarves. Yeah.
Yeah, the dwarves.
So,
Yeah, so I think my favorite good character. So my favorite evil character is definitely Sauron. My favorite good character is Durin the Fourth and Disa. Like that couple, like just the simple conversation of the first one of like when they're back in their home and Durin confronts Disa and is like, "You asked for the rings," and Disa's like, "I know," and like she is owning up to like this is like first off, it was like, obviously, it's Durin the Third's a mistake to accept it, but she was the one who pushed it. And she's seen, oh, I got tricked. So I need to now, with her husband, I need to stop my father-in-law from ruining Khazad-dûm with this ring. It's also, like, interesting to see how fast the greed comes in and everything else. How fast like Durin the Third is like wanting to hoard treasures. Like he never did that before in the rest of the season. and like the treasure gathering scene where all that are just like dumping things
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
throne. And then also the I think right after that dumping scene, it's when Anatar comes and asks for Mithril, and Durin the Third says nah, and Durin the Fourth's like, oh good, there's something in my father that's like good and noble, that he's like
Yeah.
he recognizes that Anatar is not who he says he is, which I love Durin the Fourth, who's like, no, I don't trust this guy. He's my dwarf. And Durin the Third's like, nah, he'll be back. I just wanted a better deal. And I was like, and Durin the Fourth is like, what? And that's when they start. That's when they do the whole that bat scene where Disa calls down the bats on the people who are trying to mine more. I'm very curious to see where that goes, and everything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. The guy who is leading that mining expedition,
Yeah.
is Narvi,
Yeah.
who made the door, or helped Celebrimbor at least make the door for Moria. And I don't think he gets much notice in the lore, but it is cool to have him as more of a I guess bigger player in the story in the episode. Because I do like his character,
Yeah.
and of course I think he's just doing what the king says because like he's just being obedient in a lot of ways. But I feel like at the same time though he's like, no, I know that this isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's like a guy who has a job, and he's happy with his job, and yeah, sometimes I may ask him to do things he doesn't like, but he's like, I'm happy with my job, so I'm just going to stick with it. That's kind of the vibe I got from him. He's like, I don't want to. When Disa confronts him, he's like, please move. Like, I'm on orders of the king. I don't want to do anything. Like, please. He's like, I don't want conflict. Ian's like, and then eventually he has to. And then she calls down the bats on him and his crew. And that was cool. I forget in the show because this is kind of later on when Sauron comes back. I don't remember him because he has that container of mithril. I forget if there was a scene of him like stealing it from like a storage or someplace. I forget.
Yeah. That is one, I guess, kind of Easter egg that I picked up after watching a review of the episode as well. And what they were saying is that when he cut his hand, that's when he actually like made the mithril, like kind of conjured it up to make it look like mithril, but it actually isn't. But yeah, me too. But because I couldn't really remember connecting the two, I remember those two things happening.
Yeah,
and I think this has happened for me like multiple instances in the show where I don't know how things connect. And there's another part in this episode actually between Adar, and we can talk about it in a little bit here, but. Between Adar and Galadriel, and Galadriel mentioned something about the rings, and it's like about that Sauron wants to make, and it's like, wait a second, like, how did she know that Sauron was wanting to make more rings? Because that was something that is she just assuming that? Like, we know
I assume she's probably assuming that, because. From what I understand, I think she understands like Sauron wants to control all races. So in order to do that, he has to make rings for all races. So the main three are of course elves, men, dwarves. I don't think anybody outside of the Stranger knows about the halflings yet, and the Easterlings. Obviously, the Easterlings know about them. So they don't know them. So I think that's the first confrontation, the first conversation that Galadriel and Adar have. is talking about that. And it's shown that Adar really doesn't want an alliance. Adar just wants info. He's just dangling an alliance in front of them. Which I think it would be an interesting thought experiment if a character like Adar actually existed in Tolkien's lore. Like, kind of like somebody like, Morgoth and Ungoliant. Like, Ungoliant didn't want to work, fought Morgoth. And, like, is not technically allied with
Right, except they did in the very beginning.
and did in the game,
Yeah.
but like after that, they're like always kind of at odds, even though they're both evil.
That's true, because
yeah.
it was interesting, yeah, because she did try to take him out.
Yes.
She was pretty powerful, like,
Yeah.
she got to be more powerful than Morgoth.
Yeah. And Morgoth only got saved because I think his Balrogs came and saved
Right.
him.
Yep.
Yeah. So I remember that. And so like they have no love for each other, and so I'm assuming. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming the story with Adar, he's one of the original elves that Morgoth twisted into orcs. Is that
Right,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. That's what I got.
Because, like, in the episode 2, when they're talking, she says Galadriel calls him an orc, and he says, no, Uruk. Which is interesting because, I don't know, it's like, he seems like he's more of a broken elf than an orc or an Uruk,
Yeah.
It's a little bit confusing there, but
Yeah, but I mean, he is unique. He's the only one of his kind, I think. That at least we see in the show.
right.
So, but yeah, so they have that conversation. He shows him the crown. I guess it was Morgoth's crown that Sauron refashioned to fit him. That he used in the beginning of the season to use destroy his mortal form in the intro sequence of the first episode, and then he shows it again, and Galadriel's me like, put off is like, that's Morgoth's crown, and he's like, yeah, basically I'm using evil to destroy evil, which I don't think in Tolkien ever works.
That's a good point.
So that's another reason. I think that's another reason, going back to that, is like the reason why Morgoth's crown didn't kill Sauron is evil can never destroy evil. You have to have an act of good destroying evil. Like like later on, of course, in the Lord of the Rings series, the only way Sauron is actually defeated is when the ring is destroyed by sacrificing it.
Not by using the ring.
Not by using the ring
like
to
what Boromir wants to do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or other characters. So that was interesting. And then we go into the story of the stranger and the hobbits. Well, the halflings, I guess. They're not. I don't know if they're called hobbits yet.
They're called harfoots.
Harfoots,
which I guess is a word that Tolkien used for like halflings.
Yeah. I think it was also interesting how they're using Tom Bombadil in this one, as like he is the representation of the Valar in this area, to like with the wizards. And so I am curious how they're going to take it. I'm wondering, because he says you have to choose your friends or your destiny at the end of the conversation. And I'm curious if he's giving him a test of like, hey, are you going to just go seek power, which is your destiny, what he's calling your destiny, or are you going to go and do the right thing and save your friends? Which that's what I would consider the right thing. I don't know how Amazon's going to handle it.
Right, but it's what he's showing there, and it's again like, unless in the end the stranger is able to do something really courageous heroically and saves everybody, and like they do that well, which I think is like kind of where they're putting it, so that's why they're stretching things out in such a long way, because it's like, all right, well, maybe helping his friends is his destiny.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but it just seems like there could be more of a direct way of him going about things
Yes.
than this. And I think that would be helpful because like the closest thing you have to this, and you kind of go back to the way that Gandalf appeared back to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, right? Was kind of the closest thing to him coming to Middle Earth for like the first time, right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of like think about where he had to be, in a sense, like reborn and kind of like understand like languages again, and more or less. That's kind of what they got across in some of those scenes, and I think, and that is true too, I believe, with the lore. So, anyways, with that, it just doesn't seem like the stranger would need to be learning like all these things for this long of a time in order to get to like what he wanted to do. And I think too that would help the story to make things a little more interesting, I think. And also just like give him more reason to be in the show, and more of a, hey, this is pointing where you need to get to. Because thinking about this as well, and of course this is kind of a little bit scrambling around maybe, but so on the Harfoots and the Stranger Still, the Black Wizard is cool, but I think almost that he's just another detour.
Yeah.
In the storyline.
Yeah, he's like the I guess how you would describe it is like he's a in the storyline it would be like in the Fellowship of the Ring, like he is a Balrog. He's a scary threat, but he's isolated and located in one area and doesn't do much outside of that.
Yeah.
Whereas like the main threat is Sauron, who's trying to affect all of Middle Earth. Which he's doing throughout the show. Like I understand what Tom Bombadil's trying to do. Like they're trying to use Tom Bombadil by saying like, hey, if the Dark Wizard and Sauron team up, it's going to be a bad time, which I agree. But you've shown us nothing that they even know each other exist. So why would they ever team up if they don't know each other exists? Like one of the ones in like in The Hobbit, the Smaug and then the orcs and goblins don't actually like work together. They all just kind of end up all at the Erebor, and Smaug dies first, and then they have the fight, and then everything else. So like it's unknown, as is described in the book, if actually they were trying to work together, or like somebody was trying to make them all work together, and they just Smaug just died before the orcs and goblins could reach him.
As in if Smaug, it would be like Smaug would be like basically attack the orcs as well, because he's still like hoarding his jewels.
Yeah. So it's like unknown, because also the other thing, like the show throughout the show is like Adar is obviously evil, but he's fighting Sauron. Like they've given us no indication that the Dark Wizard he sees Sauron, immediately joins his side.
Yeah.
Like we can't assume that. Like Tom Bombadil's telling us we should assume that, but that's it. And I love Tom. I love his characteristic of Tom of like he's obviously very wise, but he's also like kind of carefree. But also at the same time, I think he's more serious, because like when we see him in the Fellowship of the Ring, the little bit in the books, he seems to be very carefree. It's also sent millennia later, which to him probably doesn't matter much. But he also is dealing with hobbits, which are very different from an Istar. So I think also he might have been told by the Valar, hey, there's an Istar going to be coming to you, or I don't know, or something else. And so he understands, okay, I need to actually be serious now and not just my normal carefree self, because I've been given a mission. And so that's the thing. Like, that's the only reason I can think of, like, why is he more serious than he's shown, like, in the books and everything else. But once again, that's also that's a wild, conjecture that I'm assuming Amazon's making for their show, to show like this is why Tom Bombadil is more serious than he shows in the book. Where in the book he's like very carefree and doing
Right.
crazy things and like whatever else. And
Yeah,
so,
that would be the only reason, I guess. Like, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. That would make him more serious. But at the same time, like, he, I think, would be at least a little more jollier, or like
Yeah.
a little more like, or singing more songs,
Yeah.
than that.
yeah,
And I think the whole idea behind his character is different
yeah,
by the way that Amazon's portraying him.
yes, yeah,
So, of course, they're taking some liberties there. I think it is kind of weird how Tom Bombadil tells the stranger that he needs to like prepare for facing up against the Dark Wizard, and maybe even Sauron. Maybe he was saying Sauron more so than the Dark Wizard. But
I forget the exact wording.
anyways, I guess if it was Sauron, then like my point is kind of null. But I just think that him going up against the Dark Wizard is kind of a side, like it's like a sidetrack.
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
it just seems to me that they're building up like they're building up so many things here, out in EREGION. Oh, yeah, there you go, right
yeah,
there.
Eregion.
Yeah.
And as we will, I don't know if you can see it, but Rune. This is Eregion, and Rune's all the way over here, which that's big distance.
Yeah, it is a big distance, but still, like, yeah, I can't see where London's on there. I thought they would have it maybe, but yeah, I mean, London I thought would be somewhere around here. I mean, that's not too close to Moria, but anyways, yeah, so it just seems like there's now that there's really a split in the storyline, and I guess it would seem a little better if it was more focused as to at least what the stranger is up to.
Yes.
And like what's his point.
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like what I feel like is the storyline with the stranger should basically be its own miniseries. It should not be a part of the main series. That's what I feel like. Like the other story. So we'll get to this because I think after this one is the story of Numenor. Like, the story of Numenor is also very disconnected from the story if you don't know what's in the books. Because if you know what's in the books, Sauron is eventually going to go to Numenor. And so they're setting that up and everything else. So like, obviously, if like I knew nothing about Lord of the Rings, I would obviously say like, okay, the Hobbit stranger storyline is weird, and also the Numenor storyline outside of like they saw something in the Palantir, so they went to Middle Earth and they went to fight. Like outside of that is like, why are they including them? But obviously because we know in the books like Sauron has to go to Numenor. So, like, seeing what's going on in Numenor before Sauron shows up and how, like, the temple scene was wild. How much they showed the brokenness of the society. And I forget what they called Ar-Pharazôn's son's name, but, like, the fact of he was just like he was the most backstabby man since Grandma Wormtongue.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
Like if Grima is like, is a descendant of that guy, I would not be surprised. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Like he is the most underhanded person I've
Right.
ever seen.
Yeah, he's kind of a snake.
He is a snake.
Yeah. But
So,
definitely. Yeah, so we can just move on then to the
it's the judgment scene.
moving on. Oh yeah. So in Numenor, we've got starting out there. We have Elendil who approaches Pharazôn, right? They're putting him on trial
Mm-hmm.
and tell him to at least deny or recant his
Crimes.
crimes, and then
Swear fealty.
swear fealty to Pharazôn.
Mm-hmm.
Pharazôn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he wouldn't swear fealty, so they said, all right, well then we'll let the Valor decide. What a great idea, guys! Let's just throw him in the sea. Let the Valor decide.
Yeah.
And then so they're about to throw him in. And then Muriel.
Well, before that,
so
before that, they have the scene in the scene in the jail cell before it, which the daughter comes in and is trying to convince him to say, "Hey, I don't want to lose you two. I've lost my brother." Obviously, neither of them know the brother's still alive. Isildur. And then Muriel also comes in and is like, "Hey, we need Numenor not to be fractured." And Elendil, I think, speaks something which spurs her to action. He says, I think it was, "Faith is not faith unless it is lived." Which I could definitely, I don't know if it's actually from the books, but I could definitely see something like Tolkien would write something like that. So I love that line from Elendil. I also just love how much Elendil's getting more involved and is like a much more of a central character, along with Muriel. And so when they have that scene, they both can't convince him, and then Elendil's ready to go into the ocean, and then Muriel shows up and says, "Hey, he did it in my name. Throw me in the ocean because I'm the ultimate responsibility." And Pharazôn, I mean, they're like, they probably want to get, at this point, they probably want to get rid of both Muriel and Elendil, so they're like, either one is good, so sure. We'll throw either one we could throw in the ocean, we'll just throw in the ocean.
Yeah.
And obviously they don't. Obviously, I think they're assuming that they're so much in the right that the beast. I forget what's the beast called?
I swear they call it a worm.
A worm, yeah. The worm's just going to eat her, and we'll be rid of one threat, and then we can focus on the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, the worm, I guess, and the Valar look at her, and they're like, "Nope, you're doing the right thing. Go back." And so, I mean, obviously they've made a few mistakes and everything else. Because Elendil, I think, starting the fight in the temple and everything else and doing all that. I don't think that was smart, which got him into the business. And then Varendil died. Varendil got killed because of the fight. And so, but they're like, the Valar are confirming, like, "Hey, yes, you've made mistakes, you've done things, but your heart's in the right place." And so we're gonna, also the idea of like, redemption and being able to like try things again, do things better, is definitely a story in Tolkien. Like, when Frodo throws away Sam going to Dol Guldur, gets stabbed by Shelob and everything else, Tolkien doesn't immediately throw Frodo away and just have Sam go throw it in. He gives Frodo a second chance to do it right. So.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same way of this one of like, hey, we're doing that kind of idea of like, you do get a second chance.
Right.
So.
A second chance, even though like she was in the right.
Yeah.
But,
Mm-hmm.
and then also it's another Christ-like part of it too, with her just putting her life at stake instead.
Yes.
For Elendil, and in a sense for all of the faithful.
Yeah.
In a big way, because she is the leader of the faithful. So, what happens to her? I think like it says a big part about where like the faithful stand and the kingsmen stand. Yeah, and it'd be interesting too to see how like the split happens between the faithful and the kingsmen, and how like the faithful get to Middle Earth and actually start settling it, and how that goes. Which would be neat. Like I think, like, because that to me is like really interesting. I think that would be really cool to see. And like And I think that there are parts that I know like Amazon could do a lot better in. Like I think like yeah, this I see stuff where it's like yeah, I can see how this could like really go places. But it seems like they rushed certain parts, and then it's like, well, these other parts you could like drag out longer, but it's like, but you're rushing this storyline, so like by the time you get here, it's gonna be short, and how much you're gonna be able to tell. But
Yeah. I think also that when they see, when the Arpharazon and his cohort of all of them, when they see that Miriel has been, it's a very, basically it's a divine approval that Miriel is in the right. And, you kind of saw it on his face in the episode. He was like, oh no. So this is probably, if they're doing it right, because this is the, Arpharazon forces her to marry him, I believe. Is that correct?
yeah, you're right.
So this is probably when, like, this I hope this comes up, is like, they're like, we can't get rid of Miriel. She's like, if we do that, like, people have seen she's been approved by the Valar. We need to, like, do something else to get her, like, I guess, on our side, but not working in a place of power that we can't control. So they're probably going to come up with the idea of the marriage.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Yeah, that'll be a different twist on things too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think going back to the harfoots,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see how that plays out with Gandalf, or maybe Gandalf.
I'm
getting his staff.
I'm personally hoping it's a blue wizard. I don't think it would be a good story if this was actually Gandalf, because the blue wizards are the ones who are in the east, and they actually are the ones, they do actually fight against Sauron, and then they just never get mentioned again because they're in the east and the east doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, Mark's like kind of theory was, well, maybe they'll use the name Gandalf anyways because everybody knows it.
Who knows? Yeah, it's just the problem of, Tolkien wrote such a big universe, and it's like, the hard part is like he wrote the stories, everything else, and the problem is like we're coming after he's gone, and everything else, and like we're like, we want more of the stories, but obviously he could only write so much in his lifetime, and so we kind of have to, guess what he would probably think. And so, yeah, my personal thing is I would like Amazon to use them as a blue wizard, and call them not Gandalf, because, I would be nice to have, because, it would be nice to have, Radagast, Saruman, and Gandalf all come in through the gate, because Círdan has the ring now. And then that's when Círdan recognizes Gandalf as the wisest of them, and that's when he slips him the ring. So that would be good, because it wouldn't make sense, because they're already here, and the blue wizards do come first, I believe. That's correct? I believe.
I think they do come first. Yeah. But as far as I know, the timeline is like so like scrunched that the blue wizards like were like got to Middle Earth before Gandalf and maybe even before Saruman did. So especially with Gandalf, like Gandalf gets to Middle Earth, I don't know, like towards the end of the Second Age, I think. Maybe it was just the beginning of the First Age, or Third Age rather. And yeah, so he and the Blue Wizards are like very much like separated, as far as I can recollect. So, I mean, it would work for Círdan to give Gandalf his ring in this because they have Círdan there, and they would make Gandalf in the picture as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that would be cool. So yeah, I think we covered all the storylines. I don't think there's anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just have the last scene is we kind of already touched on the illusion scene where the siege starts. Adar starts the siege because he gets the information on Galadriel that confirms that Sauron is in EREGION.
Yeah.
And that's really all he needed. So he commands the siege to start, which it's very cool. They do war machinery well. It's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
So, and then Saruman does the illusion on Celebrimbor to get him to go back to work. And I am very curious if he's going to how much of Sauron he's going to how much Sauron directs the defense, and is he going to cause the lines to fail in some way when he knows the rings are done, or basically he's going to be a competent general until the rings are done and then let EREGION fall.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, it'll all be interesting because I remember in the trailer how they talked about Celebrimbor and Sauron, and Sauron was telling him, "Hey, I want the 9." So basically, Celebrimbor is hiding them. I guess what actually happened is that Celebrimbor makes all the rings, tries to hide them. Sauron tortures him for them. Sauron gets the rings, and then, was it that? Yeah. Anyways, he gets the one ring. Maybe he comes back after he gets the one ring. After he makes that, and then comes back to Celebrimbor.
Yeah, which is I'm very curious because he has to make it in Mordor because that's he makes it in Mount Doom, so Adar has to be taken care of somehow because Adar's not letting Sauron in. So I'm wondering if Adar gets taken care of during the siege.
It could be. Well, also think about how Galadriel, when talking to Adar, was saying that Sauron is just using this whole thing to his own advantage. He's wanting you to attack
which he did. He
EREGION.
did set that up in the first episode. He dropped a lot of hints to Adar when he was being captured in Mordor.
Right.
To make Adar go attack EREGION. So.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess Sauron is working things to his advantage. The only thing I guess that, in a sense, I would like to see a little more of is Sauron actually have an army of his own.
Yes, definitely.
Because at the beginning of this season, they showed, which is one of my, if not my worst episode, or at least my worst scene, was when Sauron is trying to convince the orcs to be on his side
instead of just being I am all powerful. I am the most powerful lord left after Morgoth. You should just follow me. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Essentially, but he's basically just putting on this sense of just being an elf, a fair elf that as we're saying, doesn't really have much power, isn't showing much magic. So with that, he's not commanding an army to follow him. So how is it gonna change? The other thing is too, and this is kind of part of it as well, and that's why Adar is connected to the orcs, is because he's considered their father, because it's he was the first elf taken, or torture, whatever, into being an orc, and now all the orcs basically spawn from him in a sense, because I think it is said that the orcs do reproduce essentially after the men do.
Yeah.
And the children of Luvatar. So, but with this, it's almost like I feel like I'm supposed to like the orcs more, and in their portrayal, so that it's not this sense of okay, are they going to band up with Sauron in the end? Are they bad? entirely.
I,
So
so
it's kind of like, anyways, this looking at it like this, it's
Yeah.
like, all right, I wish the orcs weren't given such a kind of like, I don't know,
Sympathetic look.
yeah, sympathetic,
Yeah.
and it was a little weird for me to see like the baby in the hands of the in the arms of the mother, and like, how are you supposed to play like an orc who's like comforting its child? I don't know. It just seemed a little odd.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
out of place, but
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like the differences between like Tolkien is definitely, Tolkien definitely has pity on the orcs because he knows where they come from. Like they're coming from elves, but like every time he portrays an orc in the books, and every time they're always evil. They by the time they become an orc, they they are beyond you know they are beyond redemption because they can't do that. Whereas in Amazon seems to have a much more generous view of the evil side of being like, hey, there might be a little bit of good in them somewhere, which is like one of the differences.
there's a worldview difference.
Yeah, it's a worldly difference. Yeah, and the I do appreciate. I'm not sure because this is. I forget how the rings are made in the books because I haven't read the Silmarillion in forever. But I like the idea for the differences of like the idea of like how they've structured it because they've reorganized it. They've done the 3, the 7, and the 9. And from what I understand was like the 3 was made with the pure intentions of Celebrimbor in his heart. He had there was nothing evil and everything else. Like even though Sauron like helped him and like kind of everything else because Celebrimbor himself was pure, the rings themselves are pure. But then when on the 7, because he's lied to Galad, even though it was very heavily pushed by Sauron in his Sauron way, of like, I remember when he writes the letter and Sauron, has that fake like, oh no, what are you doing? And like, I know in his mind he's like, yes, yes, that fact of like the Amazon thing of like, hey, as Celebrimbor does more and more things to like cover his tracks and like follow do more things and like just push on into other stuff, the works he creates, the rings he creates become more and more corruptible. So like
Yeah.
for their universe, for their timeline where like the 3 rings are made first, I like how they're doing it in this way. But once again, it's also obviously it's they changed it for their show, which it's not right for the lore because the 7 and 9 were made first and then the 3 were made.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, like what you're talking about, because like it seems that so Sauron's affecting Celebrimbor, which is then affecting the way he makes the rings.
Yes.
Whereas I think, from what I'm thinking of in like for the lore, it was more that it's the fact that Sauron's there and he's helping to make the rings, not necessarily corrupting Celebrimbor. So that like Celebrimbor at the end of the day is still able to make the 3 when Sauron's not there, and it'd be okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of like the gist that
Yeah.
I was getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, but definitely the I don't know if this is in Tolkien, but it is in other works of like the idea of like the intentions of your heart go into your work. Like it's very famous in other things. I'm not sure if this is really a Tolkien thing, but it's like it is a very Christian thing of like where the outpouring the stuff that comes out of your heart, like if your heart is dark things will come out of your actions and words and everything else. So like that's kind of how Amazon is running with it. It seems like is like because there is darkness in Celebrimbor's heart, the things he makes are corrupted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, that is a good way, of looking at that and thinking about it. Yeah, I think that as far as just like favorite parts, um, like that for this episode, I think that Anatar and Celebrimbor
yeah,
and that their whole interaction and the Smiths and all like is my favorite
yeah,
of the episode. And unfortunately, my least favorite was probably starting with Arondir and then
yeah,
just like ending at that kind of.
yeah.
Don't
That
really
was
know they were going with it.
yeah,
So
that was just kind of like a thing of like Arondir finds the orcs and they're going to Eregion, which you already knew they were going to Eregion because Adar was going to Eregion. Like you've seen that before.
I don't know that Arondir would have ever like come across that.
Yeah, probably
Um,
not.
so
And like it seems weird that of all the elves, like he sees them. Yeah.
right, well, yeah, because the only thing with that might have happened is that they're trying to. No, I'm just thinking. Well, maybe it's because Amazon's gonna tie in like some reinforcements. They're gonna come from like the
Yeah,
Plagueir,
yeah,
and somehow that would be there. But then also like Elrond is gonna bring the cavalry, which I'm just thinking of because of the trailer. He rides. He
yeah.
has the
I think
cavalry and
eventually, I think it was episode 5 where he's talking to Gil-galad, and Gil-galad's officially just like no. Like I think eventually Elrond is going to either he's going to take, he's going to pull an Aemir and just be like, I'm going to take the cavalry and just go off on my own, or he's actually going to convince Gil-galad to be like, no, we need to send the army. So
yeah.
yeah, which that would be an interesting if they have Elrond pull an Aemir from Rohan and the Two Towers where Aemir is like, Theoden's not protecting my realm. All right, I'm just going to do it. So
Yeah, yeah. Which wouldn't be a surprise with
No.
all the references they've made so far
yeah,
from the other stuff, but
yeah.
yeah.
And that also would connect to how Elrond eventually makes Rivendell, because that would make him like, okay, he's kind of separated from Gil-galad. Maybe he finds some refugees from Eregion, and then he goes to Rivendell, the place he finds Rivendell, and he's like, okay, hey, we need to set up basically a refugee camp and rebuild a town because, this is this. So,
Right. At the end of the whole thing. So. Well, thanks, Nathan, for joining me and reviewing this
yeah.
episode, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
And Mark, if you are listening to this, if I made any lore mistakes, you can correct me later.
yes, we'll do. Yeah, so catch us, guys, for our next episode on the review of episode 7. Thanks for visiting the White City. Before you leave, please subscribe to our podcast and check us out at thewhitecitypodcast.com. We're on YouTube or Facebook under the tag at the White City Podcast. I just wanted to correct something that I said in this episode about the time when Sauron made the rings and the time whenever he came to Eregion to siege it. So he actually made the rings with the elves, so which would have been the 7 dwarven rings and the 9 rings for men with the elves before they sacked Eregion. So even though in the Rings of Power, the 9 rings are basically being made at the same time as the siege at Eregion, in the lore, actually, Sauron helped them make those rings before, and then went back to Mordor, created the 1 ring at the same time the elves created the 3. So with that, there's just got that wrong here in the episode. So wanted to clarify that.